Hi everyone. So I realized that I haven't been here in a long while, but and also some things have changed. My hair is red now and everything. First of all, I know I haven't been uploading in a while, and recently I have been working, or I started working, studying for my master's in history. So yes, I have been pretty busy, especially this first semester, and it should get a little bit easier the next semesters, I think. And I also wasn't able to read things in order to make videos about them specifically, or really listen to so much new music also to make videos about it. I of course did listen to some new music, which is what I'm gonna talk about today. I wanted to make it a point to listen to some new music, some maybe new genres or subgenres that I am not that familiar with, or that I just don't listen to very often, and just see what I may like. Some people say, maybe you've heard, that the music that you listen to in your teens and your 20s is the music that you'll probably listen to the rest of your life, and I just wanted to kind of widen the scope a little bit more before I'm out of my 20s. So yeah, that's why I made it a point to listen to these albums in particular. And also sometimes I'm just curious about how people react to, for example, the music that I'm familiar with, if they themselves are not, if they don't usually listen to the music, kind of how they make sense of that, and what they think of it, which is kind of the appeal of videos that are titled in ways like, XYZ people react to metal, death metal, and things like that. So I guess I'm doing something kind of similar with new-ish genres to me, or subgenres. So the first album that I want to mention is King Von's Welcome to O Block. This is his first and last, I think, studio album, unless he made some studio albums before, but I'm pretty sure that he only came out with, singles and EPs and stuff like that, and this was his first studio album. And of course he's not gonna come out with any new ones because he actually died some years ago. Only a few years ago he was, involved in gang violence in Chicago. So he got killed. But what I find interesting and really appealing about his music is that it's just kind of fun and exciting. There's just a really charismatic energy going on, which explains why he blew up so fast, seemingly so fast, because I didn't really listen to this music when he was even alive, when I even knew about it. So I don't know how much hype there really was, but it seems that it was pretty, that some of his singles became very successful. From this album, I would say my favorites are Armed and Dangerous, The Code, and All These N-Words. And those I don't know, those are the ones that I just find the catchiest. I have listened to them over and over. In fact, I would say that from the albums that I'm gonna mention, this has been the one that I have been listening to more often. I guess it's a bit easier and a bit, I would say, more accessible, right? To listen to, a bit catchier, not something that is, you need like a bunch of specific references and like cultural baggage to understand, if you will. And something that I find interesting, my least favorite song I would say is Mad at You, partly because, it comes off a little bit misogynistic, which is totally unexpected, of course. But I partly don't really think it sounds that great, but I do have to say that in the case of that song, I find it a little bit surprising that it has this section where his girlfriend, as a narrator, is supposed to be responding to him and his accusations, essentially calling him a hypocrite. And I think it's interesting that he has that section of sort of self-awareness and a response to himself going on in that same song, which he is in charge of. Okay, sorry you can see a microphone here, but I want it to be closer to me, and I just don't know how to really fix this whole setup. I think I mentioned the microphone before. It's new-ish to me, more or less, and since I haven't been filming, this is just, I'm kind of relearning it, but let's keep going. So next one is Between Buried and Me Colors 2. There's a Colors 1, but I haven't listened to that one. So this is one that I would say I'm not really familiar with. I'm not really into metalcore that much. And therefore, I do kind of recognize metalcore when I hear it, but I don't really know why. I don't really understand the technicalities and the intricacies of metal and really music in general, you know, and music theory and so on, to understand what exactly makes a genre and a subgenre what it is. I just kind of know it when I listen to it, as most people do. And I'm also not that familiar with progressive metal as a whole. I do enjoy some, for example, death metal that has some progressive elements, and regular, I guess, classic heavy metal that has also some progressive elements, but I'm not extremely familiar with what is it, you know, Dream Theater and Tool and so on, and bands like that, or Opeth, I guess. I enjoy the melodicness of these albums, especially the, I guess, softer parts and the clean vocals together with the guttural ones. I like it, I think it's cool. What I don't love as much, I guess, is the fact that there's also these constant changes in moods. There's sometimes these really short and really, I guess, short-lived shifts in genre and in style. And I think maybe it might be a little too many for my taste, and I think it's partly because I'm not familiar with this band, but I sometimes it felt like they weren't really sticking to any particular theme or mood or anything, as if they kind of didn't trust me to not fall asleep while listening to the album, and they had to like keep changing things up to keep it interesting, you know. I also just don't feel like they stick to a consistent theme in terms of the instruments and what the instruments are doing, if that makes sense. In the sense that we, for example, have both a flute section and an acoustic guitar section in the same song, and they don't seem to be calling to each other or relating to each other in any way. Even the lyrics don't seem to really be sticking to any topic in particular, so they don't really help much with that. But that's only the case for some of the songs, and mostly just the very longest ones. So there's some that I think are really, really good. That doesn't really apply to all of them. And also there's this section in Prehistory, which sounds really funny to me, and I'm not sure if it was meant to be funny, but it kind of has these cartoonish moments that remind me of that Rosalia meme. And I'm not sure if I love it or I just really hate it. So my favorite songs in this album, the ones that I felt were the most cohesive, were Monochrome, the first one, Never Been / Future Shock, Bad Habits, and Human is Hell, which is the last one. Next one is Chief Keef, Final Reach, and this is another drill rap artist, and he's still alive though. He's actually from the same area, I believe, and on the same general gang on the same side as King Von, which is really just a coincidence. I wasn't really planning to, you know, keep it consistent in terms of sides or anything. Clearly, obviously, I have nothing to do with it. I literally live in the north of Mexico, so why would I care? Or why would I have any stake in what happens in Chicago? But, you know, that's beside the point. So some of the songs here do sound pretty similar to each other sometimes, but my favorite ones there are actually the most successful ones. So I Don't Like and Love Sosa, those are pretty, I just think they're, you know, the catchiest, and they have maybe the most interesting sound. There's a reason why I think they became the main ones that made him famous. The rest of the album, from the few times that I have listened to it from front to back, they do come off a little bit more as filler than anything else. But, you know, it is an interesting and exciting album to listen to. But I guess that since there is a lot of repetition in the songs and in the album, you can kind of get tired of it pretty easily or pretty quickly. Next one is Molly Drake, The Tides, Magnificence. This is a little bit harder to, I guess, categorize in terms of genre. These are songs from the 40s, and they're songs that are meant to, they were composed from poems that Molly Drake herself wrote, and it has that kind of eerie, creepy atmosphere that sometimes songs from the 40s have. Not just because they're from the 40s, but also these ones in particular, they kind of have these very melancholic sound to them. They are I would say mainly sad poems. There's a little bit of hope there, maybe some optimism, but I would still say they are mainly more on the sad or melancholic side. And this is actually a compilation of songs by her, and I found it through watching Rob's Media, which is a channel here on YouTube, and he made a list about disturbing videos on YouTube or something like that, and one of them is this sort of horror art video called From the Earth by the channel Burden, which uses this kind of, I guess, down-tuned, if you will, or like the reverbed version of the song How Wild the Wind Blows from that album by Molly Drake. And it actually does sound kind of creepy, and it goes with the visuals, which are a little bit more on the graphic side.
Carries an oak tree, sleeping, but for a little while. Winter lies in the arms of spring, as a mother carries her child and never knows. How wild the wind blows.
The music isn't extremely like in your face creepy. I don't think it is trying to be creepy, which I guess is part of the charm of it and what I find about it that I like so much. So the songs are really short. Mostly they're kind of between 1 minute and 3 minutes, and there's a lot of them in this compilation. The last one that I want to talk about is Kendrick Lamar, To Pimp a Butterfly. So Kendrick Lamar seems to be one of the most respected acts in his genre. In terms of sound, I've never heard something that quite sounds like this album. I think it might remind me a little bit of something like Tricky Maxine Quay, but even then, the sound isn't really that similar. I think a big reason why people love this album and why it's so known, why it's so acclaimed, is that it's, aside from being critical of institutions, it also seems to be himself being self-reflective and very self-critical. It seems that he is expressing a lot of guilt, but also realizing at the same time that a lot of that guilt is irrational and is not necessarily going to help him unless he does decide to improve on those aspects about himself that he doesn't like, or that he thinks are inauthentic, or that he feels guilty about in some way. I realize that it's a little bit ironic that I mentioned rappers like King Von or Chief Keef in the same video where I'm talking about Kendrick, who seems to be really critical of that stuff, from the little that I know of him, of course. But he seems to be really critical of precisely the kind of stuff that the drill rappers are invested in, or they come from, or they are still a part of. But even though he's critical of that, he's being critical from a place, from himself being a part of those things. And it feels like he does understand from his own experience why those young men are doing what they're doing. There's this discussion, or this, I guess, underlying theme going on in the album between, social conditioning, or rather your conditions, in social terms, and also your agency as a person, or either as an individual or as a part of a group. And it seems that Kendrick is pointing out, without having to explicitly say it, that oftentimes these people are both victims and perpetrators. And of course a person can be both under different circumstances, and of course these lives are very complex. But what he seems to want to say overall is that you're not predestined to a life of gang violence just because you grew up in it. But I think he also is admitting in a way that he's saying that with himself now living under these different circumstances, because he's now famous and potentially rich. So it's maybe easier for him to say something like that under his circumstances now that he's out of there, because he's very self-aware, of course, of the fact that he is now not really living the life that he's now pointing at. But he cannot just cross his arms at the same time and just say, well, it's kind of what happens there. So he's trying to walk, I guess, this fine line. Of course, the album is about a lot of things, but in this aspect, it seems like he's trying to walk this line between, I have to denounce this, and I have to say and do something about this, and also not forgetting that you know, he doesn't want to come off as preachy and as coming from this high place, where others can kind of learn from his wisdom, and not trying to come off as this enlightened savior, I guess. So I know this was a really short video, but even then I hope that you enjoyed it, and that, you know, you found something interesting about listening to these albums or these types of music being kind of retold or interpreted, I guess, by someone who is not really that familiar with them. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.